with all creation, not just the people, the plants, the animals, everything is part of our world, and we should take care of it and balance with it. And I think I'll start off with a story about my life. When I was a little kid, we were pretty poor, didn't have any electricity or running water or any of that kind of stuff. And Mom was kind of nice to us. She put a pot in one of the closets because she didn't like us peeing off the porch. But the only thing we could do was pee in the pot. If we pooped in it, we had to go answer it and take it out and dump it. And I hated going to the outhouse because the porcupines loved to go in there and eat the wood around the bottom of the base. And I was always nervous about sitting down on that toilet. I'd look in the hole to see if there was any porcupines in there. And, porcupines in northern Wisconsin are a big, big part of it. My grandma did quill work. I'd pick up roadkill off the sides of the road. Grandma'd take the quills and dye them and braid them and that kind of stuff. I got a little story about that I'll start off with, I guess. This is the Anishinaabe story. Long ago, when the world was, porcupines had no quills. One day when Porcupine was in the woods, a bear came along and wanted to eat him because he was nice and short and fat. He couldn't run very fast, but he quickly climbed up a tree and sat up there till the bear went away. We went back down, started wandering around, and he found out he was sitting under a hawthorn tree. He noticed it had all those thorns on it. He said, oh, maybe I can take these thorns and put some mud on my back and stick the thorns in there. If a bear comes, he won't be able to eat. So he put some on and he went into the woods and waited for the bear. Sure enough, the bear came along and went to jump on him. The porcupine curled up in a ball, and the bear got the porcupine quills in his nose, and he went away. He didn't want nothing to do with those thorns. Winnebago or Natabajo saw what happened. He called Porcupine to him and asked, how did you learn that trick? I'm always in danger when the bears come along, Porcupine said. When I saw those thorns, I thought I could use them. Then he put some clay on the back of pine, stuck the thorns in it, and made it part of his skin. Now go into the woods, said Winnebago. Porcupine obeyed, and Natabajo hid himself behind a tree. Soon a wolf came along. He sprang on Porcupine, and they ran away howling. Bear came along, but he did not get near Porcupine. He was afraid of those thorns. That's why all porcupines today have quills. I think that's kind of a cool little story. And the porcupines were kind of a big part of my world. We used to kind of live off the land, and we would go out hunting. And one time I shot a porcupine, and Dad really chewed me out for that. It was really good eating, but he said, you leave the porcupines up in those trees because if somebody gets lost in the woods, they can always find a porcupine and get it down and have something to eat. So don't be shooting no porcupines. So I definitely followed that rule. Another little story I really like to tell is about many, many years ago. All the creatures on Earth spoke the same language, and things just weren't working right. And they decided they wanted to talk to the Creator. They decided he was up above. Somebody'd have to go up there and talk to him. The big blue heron says, I can fly high if I want to. I got these big wings. The heron takes off and he circles higher and higher. The air gets too thin. He can't get enough lift because of his wings going slow. He glides back to Earth. He says, I couldn't make it. Somebody else got to go. Creatures are all talking. Well, who's going to go? Finally, the eagle come along and said, everybody knows I can fly higher than anybody. I'll go up there and talk to the Creator. So that eagle takes off, circles higher and higher and higher. Same thing happens. The air gets too thin. He can't get the lift he needs to get higher. He glides back to Earth. He said, I couldn't make it either. Somebody else got to go. Well, all the creatures are talking. They don't know what to do. Finally, this little hummingbird come along and said, hey, let me try. I can fly really fast. Everybody laughed. That hummingbird, just a little bitty guy. But that hummingbird takes off. He gets way up there. And it gets so cold, his wings won't lift anymore. Can't fly fast enough. He glides back to Earth. I couldn't make it either. Somebody else got to go. All the creatures are sitting around talking to each other. Nobody's got any ideas. Finally, that little hummingbird comes back. Says, I got an idea. How about if I get on the back of that eagle and snuggle down in his nice warm feathers up by his neck? And he takes off, and he can take me as high as he can go. And then I'll be nice and warm. I can go from there. Everybody thought that was a real dumb idea, but nobody had a better one. So that little hummingbird gets on the back of the eagle, snuggles down in his nice thick feathers up by his neck. That eagle takes off. He circles higher and higher and higher. He can't even get as high as he got before because he's carrying his hummingbird on his back. You got to go. I can't get no higher. Hummingbird sticks his nose out. I got to go really fast. That hummingbird takes off. He gets all the way up to the home of Creator. Tells him about all the trouble we're having here on Earth. Creator says, you take some of this, we call it kinnikinnick. Sioux call it chinchasha, it's inner bark of the red willow. Down to all the creatures. Tell them to hold it in their paw or hold it in their hand. Say a prayer, put it in the fire, or put it in a pipe and smoke it. And that energy will carry that prayer up to me. Hummingbird says, nobody's going to believe that story. They'll think I didn't get here. Creator says, no, I'm going to give you a special gift to show that you really got here. And he gave him a ruby necklace to wear. That little hummingbird glided back down to Earth, runs around telling everybody the story on how to say their prayers. If you don't believe that story, take a look at that hummingbird today. It's called the ruby-throated hummingbird. He's still wearing a necklace the Creator gave him a long time ago. I really like that story, and so many of the stories are similar to that. People don't think about it, but in our tribal world, there's a reason for almost everything. A long time ago, Winnebago was wandering around looking for something to eat. And on Chequamegon Bay, on Lake Superior, you got this bay down here, there was a beaver in there, a big fat beaver, eating some tender young pine trees. Winnebago says, oh, that fat beaver would be really good to eat. I'll sneak in the water and see if I can get him. So he sneaks out in the shallow water. He dives for that beaver. The beaver saw him coming. He takes off back into Lake Superior and gets away. Winnebago says, oh, I really would like to get that beaver. How about if I put some more tender trees in the shallow water of the bay? And if that beaver comes back, I can sneak in there and get him. So he put some more tender young trees in that shallow water. Sure enough, that beaver comes back in and he starts eating. And he's eating and eating and eating. Winnebago hurries up and builds this big dam out here along the Chequamegon Bay to keep the beaver from getting back into the lake. He sneaks out in that shallow water. He runs and he dives for that beaver. The beaver saw him coming. He turns and he crashes into the dam and breaks back out into the lake, gets away. Winnebago was really frustrated, so he grabbed a bunch of the dirt and he threw it at the beaver as it's swimming away. And wherever that landed became what we call the Apostle Islands today. If you ever look on a map or ever up that way, take a look at it. Madeline Island is the home of the Creator for our Anishinaabe people. That's the biggest island. And we really show a lot of respect for the Isles. So that's a couple of our stories. If you want to hear a bunch more, come on down to Pipestone. I can talk all day. There's a 30-foot pipe out in front of our store. Many years ago, we run a gift shop in Pipestone, Minnesota, and a customer came in, and legally we're a Native American church, but the gift shop is a gift shop. And this guy really was impressed with what we do there. He was supposed to help us write a business plan, but he's walking around amazed at the quarries and all that stuff. And he said, you know, I really, really think the whole world should know about Pipestone. I'll share that with the world. And turned out he was a Dakota from Pine Ridge. And he headed back for Pine Ridge, South Dakota. That's about 6 hours Pipestone. And he's gone about an hour. The phone rings. This is Arthur. His car quit because he had a beat up car. He said, I just had a day vision, which is a big, big thing to our people. We have to build this humongous pipe, and it has to be able to smoke because the elders are standing around giving us gifts. And every time they give us a gift, smoke comes out of this big pipe. I thought, boy, this guy's nicer than a fruitcake. And he went on home. And about, a month later, one of the Medays from Sault Ste. Marie called me up. She'd been down there before, blessed our building. She said, Bud, I saw it in my dream. You have to build this humongous pipe. And I know a guy up by Cloquet that might help you make it out of logs. And I thought, well, this is getting kind of weird. I thought about it. And we're a historic site, so we got to get permission to do anything. So I envisioned putting like an 8-foot flower bed out there with a 6-foot pipe on it. And I got a hold of Historic Pipestone to see if we could do that. They had a fit. They said, it's a train station. You aren't putting nothing like that out there. They went on and on. I called Art, the guy who had the first dream, and he wasn't impressed with no 6-foot pipe. So I said, to heck with it. About 9 months later, my oldest boy lives in Spokane, Washington. He's had a pipe do a lot of things in his life. He brought me down a car. He was in Pipestone about a half an hour. Took him to Sioux Falls to fly back home. Next day, he called me up. Pop, I thought about it all the way home. You have to build this humongous pipe. I said, I heard that BS before. You know, we talked a little bit. And when he was a kid, he had lots of dreams to do stuff. And he never did nothing. A couple days later, he called me back. I said, Pop, I can't quit thinking about that big pipe. What's it going to take to build it? I said, I don't know. How big is it? He said, about 30 feet long. Geez, that's really big. So I got some graph paper and I sketched it out. I called him back a couple days later. He said, we could probably build that out of well casing, maybe 12-inch for the bowl and a stem, and maybe 8 or 9-inch where they fit together. Figured he'd forget about it. A couple days later, he called me back. I bought all the steel. Get your hind end up here and help me build this thing. Jeez. So I flew out to Spokane, started welding it all up. I drilled holes through all the sections for the stem, so if we cut a hole in the bowl, we could make it a smokable pipe. So got the pipe done, but I was screwing it up where the bowl fits on the shank. You had to cut it like a saddle. And I had a big, I called my younger boy. He ran and raved. You're trying to screw me into one of your deals, but I'll come out and I'll weld it up. So he came out and welded it. The pipe's done, but it's 1,800 miles away. They used to build Bel Air boats in Pipestone. One of their drivers called up and said, Bud, I heard you got that big pipe sitting in Spokane, Washington. If I get a boat going that way, I'll bring it down for nothing. If you help pay for fuel, that would be nice. Wow, okay. Sure enough, a couple months later, he calls me up and says, I got a boat going up that way. Tell me where that pipe is and I'll pick it up. So he took off. And a couple days later, my younger boy, the one who didn't like the whole idea, called me up and said, Pop, I hear that big pipe's heading your way. I said, yeah, a guy's picking it up. He said, who's going to put it up? I said, I suppose I am. You'll screw it up sure as hell. I got to come down there and put it up. I'm only off in January. So the pipe gets there, 20 below zero. We put the big pipe up. My younger boy says, where's the feathers for this pipe? I said, nobody talked about no feathers. You taught us we had to have feathers on our pipe to help carry our prayers to Creator. Go get me some 4x8 sheets of 1/4-inch steel. I'll make the damn feathers. So I made the feathers, put it on the pipe. It looked really cool. It irritated a bunch of people. They came and had a fit because we were advertising a sacred item. But in 2006, the Chamber of Commerce called, Bud, your big pipe's in Reader's Digest. I said, no. Yeah, in the May issue, there's a picture of it. Where's the world's biggest smokable pipe? Pipestone, Minnesota. And because of that, it's kind of become the image for the town and the county. Historic Pipestone, the Minnesota Historical Society, everybody has pictures of it on their website. And the Minnesota Historical Society even posted that story I just told you about it. So it was a big life-changing part of what we do. But could you imagine 3 spiritual people who didn't know each other, that lived 1,000 miles apart, all had a dream to build that within a year?
Well, I was struck by the idea that several people at once had the same vision, and I think that happens all the time in this world, and there may be other stories you have about that. I don't know, but I would be interested to hear that.
It is really true. Many times people have a dream about something and they think it's kind of weird and they won't tell anybody about it. And a lot of times, for me, somebody might come into the store and I'll be talking to them a little bit. And for some reason, they feel like there's something that they can share. And they'll start off with, I never told anybody else this, but, and then they'll tell their story. And I usually can hook up to another story that somebody else told that was similar to that. And it winds up being a really good discussion with many, many, many people. And I saw a question Santiago put in there, teaching the skills of storytelling. I'm not sure that there is a skill to it, but I learned a lot of the stories that I started off with from my grandma. She was an herbalist and a storyteller. And when we're sitting around on the res, we didn't have any electricity or running water, like I said before. So when it started to get dark, Grandma would light the kerosene lamp for a half an hour. She only burned it for a half an hour because a gallon of kerosene would last for a month that way. And my dad would come in from Ashland and take her to town once a month to buy supplies. So she'd get another gallon. So after dark, she'd tell stories and we'd basically sit around and wait till bedtime. So that's how I got started with some of the storytelling. And over the years, I've met many, many other elders that had stories to share. And sometimes you pick one up from here and there. If it touches your heart, it becomes part of your life. And if you choose to share it with other people, it might help their life. You know, for years and years and years, our tribal people it was against the law to do ceremonies. So we hid everything. And you'd go back in the woods. You might know somebody who knows somebody who might tell you there's going to be a sweat lodge or a pipe ceremony or some storytelling. And if you didn't know somebody who could tell you how to do that, then you wouldn't ever learn anything. And that kind of residual hiding, if you want to use that term, has continued on even today. Many, many of our spiritual people, oh, I don't want to talk about that, or I don't want to show somebody that, or somebody else might use what I told them in the wrong way. And all those things have merit, but the situation is, if you do a ceremony in a bad way, that's going to reflect back on you, not on everybody else. And the Meday spiritual ways, I was taught that there are 7 different ways of doing things on one side, and there's 7 different ways of the dark side. And if you use them in a wrong way, that's using them on the dark side, and you're going to pay. You have to be reflecting on what you're doing. I guess a good example, and I don't like this at all. Some people might come and crawl in a sweat lodge with you. And that's cool. I think it's wonderful, really. I've had some devout Christians come in and it changed their life. But somebody else might crawl in one and go back home and say, oh, I can run a sweat lodge and I can charge $200 a head for people to come in. And they'll make it a commercial adventure. In my opinion, that's wrong. And they'll have to pay for that. But it's not my problem. That's their problem. And if we want to carry that burden ourselves, then that's our right to do that too. If we don't want to share anything, don't share it. If you don't want to tell anybody anything, don't say nothing. But then if you're going to be a judge of they're doing that the wrong way because they're not doing it my way, then you're going to have to pay for that yourself. Their way is their way. My way is my way. That's all there is to that. I did a big deal down in Sydney, Australia, many years ago. We had over 500 indigenous people from all over the world doing their spiritual stuff. And one person would get up and say a prayer about something in a certain way. And then everybody else was allowed to get up and say a prayer similar to that in their way. And it was a 2-week-long thing. And it was amazing that there are so many parallels in the spiritual ways of the people all over the world. We even had the Tibetan monks there doing all our cooking, and vegetarians. And some of us were really moaning and groaning about that because we like to eat meat. One of our members from the United States got in a car and drove to town to a grocery store and bought a bunch of hamburgers so we could have some meat to eat. But again, they understood that we were different, and they accepted that we were different. And I think that's a really, really huge thing with what we're trying to do today. Go back to what I first said. We are all related. And if we can understand that, and if somebody's feelings touch your heart and you feel like sharing something with them, that's up to you. And if you feel like they're not the person to receive that, then don't say nothing. Say, hi, glad to meet you. See you later. And everything like that is our own decision to make. And if we try to do things in a good way for all creation, every morning I go out and put my tobacco down and honor the 7 directions and remember to say thank you for everything in our lives. How simple is it to say thank you for me waking up again today? It's pretty simple. The educational system is so difficult with the powerful groups that run it. You know, if we took notice of all the different races of humans and acknowledged them as we're all related. You know, they did a study many, many, many years ago, a DNA test, and I'm not sure how it was done, but they determined that we were all humankind was related to 4 women, and they came out of Africa, I don't know, 1 million years ago. But we really, truly are all related, even if your hair is the wrong color or your eyes are the wrong color or a different color. And if we can accept that from everybody, as long as what they do doesn't interfere with what we do, we should be all able to get along and quit fighting with each other.
I have my own opinion. I'm not from the United States, but and I wouldn't want to tell you guys how to do your things, but I would definitely start with the 2-row wampum belt and its teachings, and then I would talk about the wampum belt with one bowl or one dish. If our education system, no matter where in the world, would be based on those two visions of the world, we would have a much different approach towards other humans. I just read recently, the color of humans is an invention from the Europeans, colonizers, some time ago, that we should look at each other as humans, and the color of our spirit, nobody knows what the color of their spirit is. Nobody can tell you. Or the color of their mind. What is the color of your mind? Can you tell by looking at somebody the color of their mind or the color of their spirit? You can't. So if we look at each other as human beings, the approach is different, the treatment is different. If we look at each other as the 4 color of mankind, then we run into struggles. Who's the best one? Who's not the best one? Who's superior? Who's inferior? Who should run the ship? And is there only one ship? The 2-row wampum belt tells you no. There's not one ship, there's 2 ships. And how do we coexist? So coexistence is something that should be included in the education system that is not.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, well, I had a couple things. One is that in the Department of Peace Building bill, there is a whole section for peace education. And we've added in recent years, incorporating or including Indigenous knowledge in the education system, and that we should consult with Indigenous people on what goes into education throughout the public schools in America, because I think it's really, it's not there yet. And that's so beneficial. And the more I read and the more I learn, that the elders are sharing knowledge and stories and ceremonies and prophecies, and that this is so important. And I'd be interested in anything coming from your part of the world, but about more about our relationship with the earth and what we should be doing.
We call this Mother Earth, and water is her blood. And if we don't take care of the water and Mother Earth, we don't have a place to live. I mean, that's pretty simple. I don't know why people don't understand that. Why do you throw garbage in a ditch when you're driving down the road? You're abusing Mother Earth. And just dumb things like that we all have done in the past and hope we can quit doing in the future. Stop in the morning and say, good morning to Mother Earth. I'll take care of you.
If you didn't figure it out, my spirit name is Talks a Lot. There was a question posed in the chat about storytelling. Are we still teaching storytellings? Yes, we are. What was the method? The method is still the same, I think. What the quality you're looking for is somebody who can listen to a story and repeat it the way it was told, and not modifying it and not adding to it. That's how the stories get transmitted, is if they're not modified and not added to. The funny little thing you can put about Indigenous stories is Our stories don't have a conclusion. Our stories are made so that it makes you think. For the one that comes to mind right away is the story of the two wolves. We don't identify them as a good wolf and a bad wolf. There's just two wolves. One as a character, the other one as a character. We don't define them from the beginning. One is good, one is bad. You draw your conclusion. So our stories are made so makes you think, makes you reflect on things, makes you develop a worldview. So the storyteller should be neutral. The storyteller should repeat the story the way they heard it, and not add to it, add an ending to it, add a conclusion to it. They shouldn't do that. My 2 cents. And thank you very much, bud. Always appreciate hearing your voice and seeing your face.
Same here, Serge. Which means thank you for everybody being here.
I loved all of Bud's stories, and I've heard him tell stories before, and I loved them and got more out of him today than I ever have before. So thank you, Bud.
I'm so grateful just to be here in a room of peacemakers is heavenly to me. Thank you so much. Thank you, Bud, for your stories and for continuing to tell the true stories. I'm grateful. Thank you.
And it's always great to hear more stories from Bud. You know, it makes me think about, you know, how much I want to do storytelling in just the way I carry on with my life and in the way I talk to my kids and in the way I talk to my colleagues. I think that sometimes storytelling can captivate audiences a lot better than some of the other methods that we use these days. So I appreciate just being able to learn how to do it. So thanks.
Miigwech, Bud, thank you for your generosity of spirit, which I put in the chat. I really, really appreciate that coming from you and from anyone, and glad I made it today.
I'm really grateful to have been a part of this circle and for hearing these teachings that are held in such a respectful and generous way. So thank you for creating this space.
Yeah, Miigwech, both Bud and Serge, I appreciate the stories. It, you know, I'm not living in the Ashland area now, but I consider the Ashland area and Odana my home. So it was good to hear stories from home. Thank you.
Hi, yes, thank you very much for the stories. I'm glad to finally hear it. Last time, Bud, you had got sick when I was trying to listen to you in person. I guess I have one closing statement towards, you know, not going too in depth on the water stuff. Obviously, water is a sure sign that we're all connected, right? And then tying into kind of the one dish, one spoon teachings are, you know, that there's enough for everyone if we all share, but also to bring up the resonance of storytelling and how different people may have different ways of explaining some different stories. Like Serge had initially mentioned, you know, one bowl, one dish. And I was like, well, maybe that's the wrong terminology, or that's not the terminology I'm looking at. So I threw up the chat in there, right? But in talking to so many different people in different areas, people have different ways or language that they use that a lot of times mean the same thing, right? It's just that people coming from different areas explain things a little different. And so as we're peacefully working together and sharing these stories, like that is the greatest understanding, is that each one of us speaks a different language, and it's about how we commune together, which brings us back to the wampum belt. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you. I'm just very grateful to be here. Thank you very much. Thank you for the beautiful stories, and thank you for sharing that we're all related. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Bud and Serge and DJ and all of you on the call. I think one takeaway I got from this is that telling and listening are interconnected, and so are we all.
Bamapi.
Giga Wabaman.
Thank you, Bud.